Um,
Spend less than you earn. You were telling us spend less than you earn story.
right. And so the idea of learning those lessons, right? When I was living in that house that I was paying $5,000, I think my mortgage was $5,100 a month, in that house.
Ouch.
And all of a sudden I woke up one day and thought, well, that's kind of interesting. The last 3 months I've had to charge my mortgage payment. What is that telling me? What it finally told me was I couldn't afford to live in that house, right? We had overbuilt a house, and the overbuilding cost money that we borrowed. And now the mortgage payment was far more than I ever expected, and I couldn't afford it.
Your taxes went up to some ridiculous amount.
Yeah, so part of it was more money being borrowed, and part of it was taxes. And all of a sudden, my mortgage payment was $5,100 a month. Like, are you kidding me? I pay half that now, and I could afford the $5,100 a month now. I sure as shit couldn't afford it then, right? And so it's that learning opportunity that one wakes up and says, okay, am I spending less than I earn to be able to invest the difference, or am I living a lifestyle here, right? That was a lifestyle choice. I wanted to live in that big fancy house that I had built, except I didn't make enough money to support it.
Well,
And sometimes it takes a little time to kind of wake up and smell the roses on that one, right?
Well, what I think is amazing, I was just thinking of this when you were telling that story, and I think it's amazing how many, there's definitely a portion of the population that is, unfortunately, for one reason or another, I don't want to say forced, but has to live paycheck to paycheck. Then it's funny, the portion of the population that doesn't need to and chooses to. They purposely, when they get their paycheck or whatever it is, they, like you said, they feel like, oh, I deserve to have the big house. I deserve to have whatever I have. And they choose to spend that paycheck every single month instead of, investing it or doing whatever with it. So
yeah,
that's interesting.
And I would offer that I mean, maybe I'll get in trouble for saying this, but I think everybody gets to make the choice. Even if you're born into circumstances that seem like you don't have a choice, there are too many stories out there of people who were born into certain circumstances who just said, yeah, you know what, this does not work for me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to figure it out and do something different.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Tell the story of your tenant who asked you not to put a dryer in her unit.
Yeah, that is a great story. And I had, when I was still managing my own properties, I would meet every single tenant. And so I had this one tenant who came and she kind of checked out. I met her at the house. We were exchanging money. She was signing leases. And I have this program where if people arrive at my units without their own washer and dryer, and the unit itself doesn't have one in it, I offer to buy a washer and dryer for the unit. I charge them an extra $75 a month for the units, but then when they move out a year later, the units are mine. They stay. Mm-hmm. Right? And so generally speaking, what I have them do is they pay for it over time, but I get to keep them. Right? And so it's a service for them and it's a benefit to me. And so she brought her washing machine and I said, so I see that you're coming without a dryer. She said, yeah, that's correct. I said, well, I have this program. And she looked at me and she held her hand up and said, no, I can't afford a dryer. And I said, no, that's my point. I will purchase the dryer. It just costs you an extra whatever just the dryer was going to be a month. She said, no, you're not hearing me. I know what I can afford. And from a paying for electricity from my family perspective, I cannot afford a dryer. We hang our clothes because I can't afford the extra that comes with having an electric dryer there. And I was so massively impressed by her because this is a woman who, she was a single mother. She walked to work every day as a healthcare professional. So she lived always close to that facility that she worked in. She knew exactly what kind of income she had, and she knew exactly how she could spend what she had so that she could continue to have the things that her and her family needed and wanted. And having a dryer was not in that plan for a very specific reason. She hasn't been my tenant for a while now, but I've never forgotten her because I just was so impressed by her ability to manage money and her own expectations, and then my expectations about how she would live.
I think that speaks to a mindset that in the last multiple decades has been lost in the majority of the population. And I don't mean it as the recession mindset, although it's a part of that, but there's a resourcefulness and a mindfulness that goes into thinking about your finances that came, in my world, it came from the recession or the depression. And my example is actually a laundry example. My one grandmother used a Wringer washing machine. And this is not in the 30s, I'm not that old, but in the 60s, she was still using a Wringer washing machine, which meant, because they lived on a very tight budget, it meant she filled the washer with hot water, washed her whites in the hot water, and as the water got cooler, she went to different mixes of colors, and it came through. She wrung the clothes out manually into a rinsing bowl, a rinsing tub, and then again into a second rinsing tub, and then she hung the clothes on the clothesline.
God, I think all my clothes would be dirty again by the time I finished doing the laundry.
Monday was laundry day, and it took all day to do the laundry. And
Monday was the start of laundry week.
My glamorous summers were living with my grandmother, and I thought it was the best. That was my entertainment, which explains a lot about me, doesn't it?
Now we understand.
Now I get it. But
Alrighty.
there's a point to that story, because there's always a cheaper way to do it that still gets the job done. And it's resourcefulness. It's thinking about, it's being a pioneer. It's figuring out what you have to figure out. She had a very clean house, but she worked very hard.
Resourcefulness is a commodity. It's got a price tag on it for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Those that can figure out ways to make things happen where other people would automatically assume it doesn't, it equates.
That's correct.
I had another tenant who lived on the third floor of a building where my first floor tenant kind of packed up in the middle of the night one night and left. She packed her and her kids up and she vanished. And she left everything in her unit, all of her furniture, much of her clothes, all the kids' toys, food. I mean, she just packed up in the middle of the night and vanished. And so about a month later, when I found her, I said, okay, are you coming back to get your stuff? And she said, no. Okay, so I did what I had to do to cover myself before I got rid of the stuff. And the guy on the third floor owed me money because his hours were reduced or he got laid off or something. And I said to him, look, there's an entire apartment full of stuff on the first floor. I am happy to have two things happen. Number one, I am happy to have you go in there and take whatever it is you need. Anything you don't need or can't or don't want to hike up three floors of stairs to get to your unit, I'll give you the opportunity to sell it. Mm-hmm. Pocket the money. And I won't even require that you pay me with that money. You can choose to pay me with that money that you earn from the stuff that I'm giving you to sell, or not. I'm not dangling that in front of you to make sure that I get paid. I want you to take the bull by the horns to get this done, and then you decide the best use of those funds. I asked 3 weeks in a row for that to get done, and there was always a reason. It was always an excuse. There was always and so finally by the fourth, I had to rent the unit. By the fourth week, I put an ad in, I called my guys and said, move all the crap into the garage. I put an ad on Craigslist that said free stuff. And Saturday morning at 7:30, people arrived, took all the free stuff, and by 10 o'clock, everything was gone. Now, I guarantee you there was probably $1,000 or more
Sure.
of stuff there, because she had decent stuff, that if he had just taken the initiative to move it out of the unit and sell it, he would have had $1,000 in his pocket. And so the point is, I think that there are people who just don't understand how money works and how it comes into your world, right? What's that Thomas Edison quote? Opportunity
It's
looks
dressed
like-
in overalls and looks
Yeah.
looks a lot like work.
Yeah, right. Opportunity is funny because it's dressed in overalls and looks like hard work, or some shit like that. Something like that. Excuse me, my goodness. Right? But see, that to me speaks to habit number 4, right? Habit number 4 talks all about earn more to learn more. It's like what are we learning? What are we changing about the way we think to be able to earn at a higher level? That always reminds me of that one tenant. I still to this day scratch my head about the decisions that he made. What else from the habit? Go ahead, Chris.
On habit number 4, I have highlighted, if you're resistant to learning, however, you'll miss out on new opportunities. And I specifically, because this hit home to me, when his mom washes out Ziploc baggies to reuse them, tells David she can't afford new ones, she says the words, too old to change.
Yeah.
You know, you can't teach a dog new tricks, stuff like that. And
Yeah.
that's just like putting a block, and it's just like saying,
Right, and if you know David's mother, if you know who David's mother is Althea Osborne. She's the lifetime profit share, high profit share earner in our company. She's probably received in her lifetime, what, $5 million in profit share, more? Something absurd. I mean, so when he uses the example of, Ma, you don't have to wash out the plastic bags anymore. I mean, he's not talking about just anybody. He's talking about Althea Osborne there. So, back to habit 6 a second. You know, the idea of spending less than you earn and investing the rest, because we only really talked about spending less than you earn, because that's the first choice that you have to make. I think most of you have heard me say 1,000,000 times, so I'll say it just once more quickly. For a decade or more in my house, I've always been the one who has to hear the complaints about, we never do anything, we never go anywhere, we never go out to eat, we never go to a concert, we never this, we never that. And there is some truth to that, right? There is some truth to, I have spent the last decade spending money very, very specifically because I chose to push every dollar that I didn't have to spend to live, run my family, or run my business to the investment side, right? And it's the other side of this habit. Every single thing that you can push to the investment side, you push. And if that's a whole ton of money, great. And if it's not a ton of money, then keep pushing it until it becomes a ton of money, right? Or it becomes enough that you can start investing, regardless of what you choose to invest in, right? And so after 10 years of just being really, really, really frugal, the one thing I would spend on was a travel trip, because that's one thing I was unwilling to skimp on. And yet when I say skimp, we went places for one very specific reason. We didn't go places that we wanted to go. We went places that I found cheap airfare for, right? I mean, there are places in the world that I have not been, that a lot of people have been, and I've been a lot of places that a lot of people will never go. And that's because I chose to go because the airfare was inexpensive when I wanted to travel. So even the things I chose from the perspective of, how can I do this and spend as little as possible so I can continue to play that game of pushing every available dollar to the investment side. And after 10 years of doing that and driving that business on that side, I now get to make slightly different decisions about how I spend my money, because that investment business creates an opportunity for me not to spend recklessly, but I use that to A, pay for college, B, reinvest, and C, do something that I want to do every once in a while. Right? In 1 month, I was supposed to get on a plane and fly to Wales to see the Pet Shop Boys in concert. That is no longer occurring, unfortunately. I get to go now on May 25th of 2021. You know, on April 11th, I was supposed to be in the 7th row of the, what's in Brooklyn? The Barclays Center in Brooklyn, listening to Elton John. Well, that didn't happen either, right? So maybe I should stop doing these. Maybe this is God's way of saying, you're spending too much now. Public health crisis is my lesson. Right, but those are things that I just started to do this year after 10 years of not doing very much of that, because I chose to push those funds someplace else to create that investment vehicle, to create that opportunity. You know, it's the idea that Dave Ramsey talks with us about, right? Live like no one else today so that tomorrow you can live and give like no one else.
And I'm always fascinated by the people who you hear about, and I think he references a couple of them in the book, who were janitors or teachers who didn't have the opportunity that everyone on this call has to have a business that brings them unusual income, really the opportunity for exceptional income. And even on the janitor's salary or the teacher's salary, they end up with an estate in the multi-millions of dollars because they put money away in a disciplined manner. It doesn't take a lot, and over time, and everybody probably says, oh, I should have started 50 years ago or 10 years ago or 20 years ago. Start today, because it does. You'd be amazed what you can do in 10 years. Amazed.
Yeah.
And if you keep a balance sheet, you can track that. And you can look at, well, what did it look like in 1999 or 2009 and then 2019? Huh. Fascinating. Gary always says, this is one of my very favorite Gary Keller concepts and quotes. We overestimate what we can do in 1 year, and we underestimate what we can do in 5 years. 5 years, everybody's world can look completely different in a good way with some focused attention.
I think that's part of Habit 5.
Mm-hmm.
Because they that was one of the things they stole from Gary.
Mm-hmm. And I
and
love
it is
that.
funny because
Yeah.
David actually says, you know, as I'm prone to say, I'm like, you're not prone to say that. You're prone to steal it from Gary.
Gary Keller quote.
You know, it is all just making some choices, right? And I was interested the other day. My son, who is 22, came to me and said, "What do you think about me starting to invest in the stock market? It's down enough right now that now seems like a good time to start doing that." And we had been talking about him buying his first investment property, and I think he's looking to push that just a smidge, and he wants to start doing something now. And we got into this whole conversation, and he said, well, I have to do something with the money that I'm earning, because if I don't put it away now, I lose my 20s, right? And I thought, oh my God, that book that I bought a year and a half or 2 years ago is starting to pay off. You know, it's that idea. I mean, just the difference between 22 and 30, right? He looked and did the math. If you start saving X at 22 and you start saving the same amount at 30, you end up short like $2 million when you're 70 or something like that, right? At just a simple rate of return. But here's the lesson, I think, for everybody on this call, because because no one's 22. Even those of us who are close aren't 22. Harry Andrew, right? And so the idea of the title of this book, like it can't wait. You've got to start making moves on it right now, because regardless of if you're 22, 32, 42, 52, 62 or different, right? There's still time. There's still time to dive in and have your money really start working for you, so that you don't have to accept what you might be willing to accept from your future. These habits are really good habits, and I would encourage. Did anybody have any other thoughts about these habits?
Well, Rick, can I just, and I've, just because it's very pertinent to what you were just talking about with your son, and I've had this conversation with most of the people on this call before.
Well, you're
but,
like my son, so it's almost the same.
Yeah. No, but it's funny, and you know, I'll be 29 in a week and a half, but
You were already 29.
I'm close, but it's
How many
funny.
years has he been 29? Somebody start counting.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Sometimes it works to say I'm older, sometimes it doesn't. But no, it's funny because, and I know that, I'll caveat this by saying I know that it's not too late, and that's why I'm happy that we're talking about this now. But I've had this conversation with you that I was in a position right out of school living in Virginia. It was much lower cost of living. There was a booming housing market. And if only I had paid more attention, or someone told me back then, you know, what to do with my money. Because I had a ton of money and had it in a savings account. And, you know, in one sense, it helped me get up here to be able to live off for a little while. But it's so smart of him to do that, because I kick myself, and I try not to, you know, hindsight's 20/20, but I kick myself all the time, because I'm like, if I was just smart, even if I just invested or put away half of that money I had back then, how much different my world would look right now. So but that's why I'm also grateful that we have these conversations. So
Yeah, no, indeed.
Like, you're still young and you can make that choice today. Like,
yeah,
it goes back
exactly.
to, like, don't waste any more time thinking about, like, everybody, like Rick started off saying, all these rock bottom stories.
Mhm.
People have fortunes, lose them, and then
Yep.
come back and get way more than that because they have the experience.
Right.
Yep.
So you got to start with that, and it just goes back. No matter where you are today, even if you're the person making 50 grand and it takes 50 grand to live,
Yep.
you have to start where you are, and you can only cut and slash so much to a point.
Yep.
Then you have to focus on income, and it goes back to Rick's equation: more equals more.
Exactly.
So
No,
if
I
you're
agree.
focused on increasing your income and keeping your expenses where they are or lowering them, then you start building that gap
Yeah.
and increasing at an exponential level, and you catch up to anything that was left behind.
Yeah. No, it's true. It's true.
Well, I'll go back to the why I think what is the brilliance of our economic model is that we cap for a reason, right? And we don't cap so that you can then have an additional 30% to pay more bills. We cap. The expectation is that you build a life on 70-30, and then you push to cap as quickly as possible, so that then when you're at 100%, that extra 30% almost entirely now funds that other side. It funds that investment side, so that when you flip back, you want to work even harder and get there even faster, so you can start pushing that money aside, so it starts working for you, right? That's how our model was designed, and it's funny to me. Most people don't talk about it that way, and yet that is the design of the capping model, to give you an opportunity not to make more, to spend more, to make more at certain points in your year, to invest it.
Right.
Jackie, it's Thomas Edison, I think, is who is that quote, right? And the quote is something to the effect of opportunity. Opportunity is often hard to find, because most people don't realize that it's dressed in overalls and looks a whole lot like hard work.
Hard work, right.
I think that's pretty much that. I think I nailed it that time.
You did. That's
And it is Thomas Edison. Yeah.
Mhm.
Anything else on the habits before we move to the pillars?
That's good.
So what part of the pillars struck you? What pillar did you like?
See where I've got my.
This must have been a hard 2 weeks for reading,
Oh,
considering that there's only 6 of us on this call.
you know, the first one about client acquisition, I think, is enormously relevant to all of us right now. And I mean, some of it we've talked about a million trillion times, but it makes, I love the story of the ace lawyer who has the best room in the whole building and nobody ever sees her because she's never there because she's acquiring more $1 million clients for the company. And the point about that, how important client acquisition is it makes somebody virtually indispensable. That engine generation. So do you want to be indispensable to your own business? Become a master of client acquisition. Ha!
I agree 100%. I think pillar number 1, I don't know if it was put as pillar number 1 because they're saying it's the most important, but I think it's the absolute most important.
Huge,
Because
right?
customer service isn't happening without customers. And if you're the person that could find the customers, create the relationships, nurture them, turn them into business, and then continue the relationship, you're essentially the most important person in the organization. And whether it's your own business or for another company, you're basically indispensable. People will do whatever it takes to keep you and make you happy.
It's what makes you the most valuable.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. They who control the client control the business,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it's specifically then in our world, they who control the listings control the industry, right? It's all about chunking it down to the most important thing. What else from the pillars? What'd you learn from either barriers to entry?
I loved that story too. The story of him buying the $4 million building for $2.5 million because he was willing to spend about $60,000 on due diligence.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Did anybody else kind of like cringe at the thought of that? Because I did. I really was putting myself in his shoes. Would I have laid out $60,000 to find the answers to the questions? And he got the right answers. That was another happy ending. Had he gotten different answers, it may have had a different ending. But wow, that made an impression on me.
Yeah, the barriers to entry. What I thought of in my own head was opening a Keller Williams Market Center.
Yeah.
Right, because for those of you who don't know, that Keller Williams Realty International does not make that process
Easy.
simple, easy, or quick. It's actually complicated, long, and painful, right?
And costly.
And costly. And what over time, what we learned is that, when we opened our first office, certainly in the Northeast, no one had a clue who Keller Williams was, and so the simple barrier to entry was why would you open a company that nobody even knows the name of, right? And yet the barrier to entry, the low barrier to entry, it was a high barrier actually to entry, right? To actually accomplish that. And once we did that, and other people in Fairfield County started to see what the company could do, we were growing quickly, we were making money. All of a sudden, there was tons of interest from tons of people who all of a sudden wanted to just kind of jump on that Keller Williams bandwagon, right? And so what was interesting was most of those people came with money, thinking that like most franchises, as long as you show up with the money, the rest is either simple or there's not a whole lot of hurdles to jump. And in this particular company, there's a whole lot more than just showing up with the money. right? And so that chapter always reminds me of opening market centers, because it's not just about showing up with money. You actually have to show up with people and ideas and leadership qualities and skill and a plan and all those other things. And so the idea of don't shy away from, and yet I don't regret a single minute of any of that.
Maybe
Right?
1 minute. I can think of 1 minute you might regret.
Well, yeah, maybe 1 or 2 minutes. But the idea of all of that goes away, like Paul's $65,000. His $65,000 went away, except he turned it into $1.5 million of instant additional equity that he didn't have to pay for. Right? I'll make that trade all day long in that building that he bought, going back to the example Debbie was talking about. Right?
Well, and I know in one of the investment steps that we took, I know it was the purchase of Stanford. I liquidated an account, and it cost me a substantial amount to liquidate that account to buy that market center. And I thought, oh boy, I hope I'm doing the right thing. I was doing the right thing. No regrets.
Yeah. And so I just love that they talk about that, because that chapter really is about fear.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That chapter is about what fear do you have to make a move in a direction where there may not be 110% certainty. You have to start flexing that muscle of no risk, no reward. Right? I think it's the question I probably answer the most during those investor seminars that we host. And that is, aren't you concerned if? Aren't you worried about X? And fill in the blank, because everyone has their own kind of thing. And for any of you who have ever sat through that seminar, you know my answer. My answer is, no, I'm not concerned at all anymore. Was I with the first couple? Sure. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't concerned. And yet you have to, it's like, feel the fear and do it anyway.
Well, and he describes and outlines the development of that, where he went from 2 rental units to acquiring 300 in a year, and the growth that you have to go through very quickly in order to sustain that kind of increased growth. And that, until you've been there, been in the middle of that, I think that is a daunting kind of outlook.
Yeah, because you just don't know what to expect, and
Right.
it feels like at any moment your next move could be your last.
Right.
Right. And what's true is that, what David was describing was that volume showing up in his world. Right. And all of a sudden, when you're talking about that kind of volume, one false move can cost you a whole ton.
Yeah.
Right. It's why you build it this way. Right. You have to build the staircase up, because the model that you build for big, even if you're implementing smaller. That was in that chapter, I think, that I liked as well, that we didn't talk about, which was habit number 7.
You can't grow big thinking small.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Can't grow big by managing small. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And again, it's at some point you start to figure that out. Like you need, and that was also I think the chapter of systems, wasn't it? Right. What kind of systems do you need in your world? Someplace there was a systems conversation.
I think pillar 3, leverage, which systems, people, and money.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say if we get nothing out of this conversation today, highlight those 3 things and figure out what your world looks like with each of those 3 things. Where are you with each of those 3 things? What's your next step? How do you maximize the potential of those 3 things? What systems do you have in place to create leverage? What people do you have in place to create leverage? And what strategies do you have in place to create financial leverage? Crazy important. Because if you look at the pillar title, it's about magnifying you. right? And that doesn't mean work longer and harder,
Mm-hmm.
right? Some of you are like, I don't think that's possible, right? So that's not the point. The point is what system can I put in place to take some of that off of me? What people can I put in place? What strategies do I have to create that financial leverage? P.S. The financial leverage you're looking for is investing.
Mm-hmm.
Regardless of what you choose to invest in, I'm not pushing one way or the other. Well, that's not true. You know I am pushing one way. Only because
you're supposed to invest where you know what you're doing.
yes.
Yeah, you know, you're familiar with it, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, put your money where you know.
Mm-hmm.
My son also started to ask me about the stock market the other day. And I thought, oh crap, no, I am not, I am not your guy for that. I wish I could be your guy for that. I don't know anything about the stock market. I have owned stock one time in my life, one time. And that time is not now, and it hasn't been for the last 20 years. Because everything I own, I push to the side of things that I understand. I get real estate. I know how it works. I know how it moves. I understand the implications of it, the pros, the cons. And so I push all my money there. I do not diversify. I diversify by owning multiple properties. I don't diversify by saying, it's the other question I get asked a lot. Why do you own everything in Waterbury? What if Waterbury tanks? Well, Waterbury tanked 30 years ago and it has never recovered. I'm not sure it can tank more. So I think I'm pretty safe, right? What else from your pillars?
I loved his emphasis on personal guarantees.
Yeah, I read that and thought, oh crap.
I know.
Oh.
We did that wrong.
Debbie and I personally guarantee every single lease that we have. So
Not anymore. We'll go.
Oh well. It does give you leverage though, right? If they know they can't take your house if you don't pay, you do have some more leverage. Pillar 4, you've heard me say in coaching or in other classes in the last couple of months, certainly in the last year. Pillar number 4 is modeling. Find someone who does the things, or excuse me, find someone who earns what you want to earn, and figure out how they do that. And you just copy it, just model it. You don't have to recreate the wheel. That's for certain.
I'm gonna, if you haven't, has anybody on here listened to this season of Think Like a CEO? So go to the podcasts and listen to Gary Keller interviewed by Jay Papasan, Think Like a CEO. He spends 2 sessions, and I don't know if it's 2 and 3 or 3 and 4, talking about models. And he goes into depth on models the way only Gary Keller can. They're very good. This whole season is very good.
Excellent. Excellent, excellent. Yeah, but don't torture yourself. This doesn't have to be hard. Right? There are tons of people who have come before you. I can remember when we used to go and go to the Star Power conventions. That was the Howard Brinton Star Power organization, which he brand blind across the country, would find people who were killing it at a really high level. And once a year, he would bring all those people together, and there would be this convention. And the thing I learned the most from those conventions was that the best people in our industry, I think probably the best people in any industry, but I learned it in our industry from these conventions. The best people aren't the smartest people. They're the people who find people who are doing it at a high level and just do what they do. They're the copiers. They're the people who model success and just literally do and say what other people who are earning at a high level or doing things at a high level do and say.
They have
Probably the
very,
biggest aha from that.
they have very strong R&D departments. They rip off and duplicate. Plain
There you
and
go.
simple. Mhm,
So true. So it's like, okay, so who are you going to rip off next? Right?
mhm.
Look around you. And the bonus that we have is that we live inside of an organization that doesn't feel like any of that is ripping anybody off,
It's in
right? It's just called sharing. It's just called, here's what I do. If you do it, you can create the same results, right? You just have to be willing. Say it again.
It's our culture.
Yes, right. That's right. Yes, we have a culture of ripping off people. Right, but in a good way, in a positive way. What else?
I love the Steve Jobs story. And when he went back to Apple, taking it from 350 products to 10, so that he really brought his focus down and didn't chase after multiple rabbits, but just brought it down to their true core competency. And that to me speaks to, well, a lot of things. It's staying close enough to home that you know what you're doing, the territory that you're covering. And like we say in risk reduction, not going outside your area of expertise. Don't try and be an expert in commercial if that's not really where your core competency is. It's a waste of time and you just won't do it well. When you shrink it down to what you do well, you do that even better.
It's a funny analogy maybe, but I mean, you hear it. Look at the restaurant industry. You hear that all the time. How many restaurants go big with a menu and try to fit, 6 pages of menu items? And you always, if you ever watch any of those restaurant shows or anything, they always say, pick your 10 things you're good at or whatever they are, the 5 recipes that you do well, and stick to those, because that's what's going to bring you the business. The other stuff is, if nothing else, it's actually helping you lose business because you're not doing it well and people notice the things you're not doing well.
Yeah. It's the idea of, jack of all trades, master of none. People will come back to that restaurant for those things that you do really well. Otherwise, you're just a diner, and you become a dime a dozen and can charge less for all the things that you do. It's actually a really good analogy. I like that. What else? Any last thoughts as we tick out of time? I have a question. How are you going to use these habits and these pillars? Let's talk a little bit about implementation. How are you going to use these habits and these pillars to create change and different results? Please, not all at once.
I'm always struck by how much time is spent in all of these sections on mindset and thinking. It's all thinking first and coming up with the how.
Yeah, so maybe activity number 1 is sit and create your list of activities. Right? Plan your work, then work your plan.
Something I had missed, and I caught this on today's shift call, the Millionaire Real Estate Agent Energy Plan that has the 5 points. Point number 4 is plan and calendar. They call it mental energy, and I never get down to that one. I always just hit the first 3 and then go to lead generation. But that's that mental thinking time, which Keith Cunningham talks about a lot. And I think you're reading that book, right, Chris? The Road Less Stupid. Did you read that book? Oh, you didn't read that book?
No, not me.
Oh, that's a good book. It's thinking time. It's thinking time. It's the basis of intentionality, isn't it? It's the basis of building your life by design, taking time to think, and as you say, write it down. come up with a plan. Even
Yeah.
if that plan is put $5 in the bank every week. Open that account. I have been shocked at how many people are running their business without a business checking account. And that has come to light in when we needed that for these loans and things. You gotta have a business checking account, even if it has $200 in it.
Yeah.
Tell you what, the Profit First system has changed everything for me. And I just transferred my income account allocation to all the other accounts today, and then sent the 2 other accounts, my profit hold and tax hold, to the separate bank, which it's just building, and I don't even know the exact balance in there, but it's growing.
Yeah.
And that's a good feeling on the 10th and 25th of the month when you click the buttons and send money from here to these based on your percentages that you know will work. It's a sense of accomplishment, and it's protecting you, and it's also giving you growth.
And
I
it
don't
also,
know about you, but I think it's fun.
it is.
It's fun. I can't wait till we talk about that book next. I'm going to preach.
And it puts the money away so you're not tempted to use it in the wrong way. I love that.
Yeah. All right, guys. So as we are out of time, we are going to. So here's what I would love for you to do as your homework. If you didn't read these 2 sections, go ahead and read them, and then write out exactly how you're going to utilize these habits and these pillars to create change, and what kind of change you're looking to for that result to be. I want to make sure that we're not just reading for entertainment's sake, that we're reading from the perspective of let's read to make sure that we're doing something differently. And so what we're going to do for our next time, we're going to finish this sucker, which is not a whole lot. So what we're going to do is, and watch for this to come out in an email, we're going to finish the book and then do kind of a recap of the whole thing, and really kind of talk through the massive ahas that came from this, and and talk more about the implementation, talk more about what you're doing, and brainstorm together what each of us is doing, utilizing the information in this book to create a different result. And then we get to move to Profit First.
Chris's
So
book.
Profit First will be our May book. So we have one more opportunity for this. That'll be, well, we probably can do this next week and just knock it out. Let me look and see what the calendar offers us for next Friday. We may already be full, but I'll check it out, and then we can finish this sucker so we can dive right into Profit First and
The
get
other
that done
thing-
while we're still home.
On Wednesday next week, Mike Brody is going to be on the regional call at 2:00, and he was scheduled before all of this happened, and he's supposed to be talking about wealth and expenses. So I think you, in line with all of this, if you have an interest in this topic, you really want to be on that 2:00 call on Wednesday.
Awesome. All righty, guys. That's all we have for you today. So thank you for being on the call. Thank you for continuing to pedal forward in Wealth Can't Wait, because I don't know, I think it's one of the best books I've ever read, and just kind of keeps my head focused on, every time I reread it to prep for one of our sessions, it's just such a massive focus on what needs to get done and how we need to do it. All righty. Have a good afternoon. Know that there's a 4:00 on KW Connect with Gary. That will not be on this channel. That'll be on KW Connect. Gary being Gary, talking about market updates and mindset. So do check that out. And because he's on at 4, we're pushing our typical 4:30 end of day call to 5:00. We'll do that and then dive right into Ignite for those of you who are staying around for the buyer consult. Have a great afternoon. See you soon.
See you all.